Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Net General, and we have some more Total War Warhammer news. And that is that there is going to be a new Wood Elf DLC coming imminently. I imagine we'll get more details as soon as the release of their game Troy is out, coming up in the second week of August, I think, or just towards the end of the first week of August. And after that, I'm sure we'll get some more news on this. But we have a new Wood Elf DLC coming out. That is very exciting. And I thought I'd take you through some of the announcement itself and some of what we might expect to be getting in the new Total War Warhammer DLC. Let's take a look at the announcement to kick us off, shall we? Total War Warhammer 2, The Realm of the Wood Elves returns. We can reveal that the next DLC is indeed a Lord Pack focusing on the Wood Elves, and we will be revisiting one of the original core races from Total War Warhammer 2. So that means either the Dark Elves, the High Elves, the Lizard Men, or the Skaven. This Lord Pack is packed full of all the great content that you've come to expect from Total War DLC, but this time we are excited to talk about a few additional ways we are giving a little extra back to our fans who have joined us on this journey through the Warhammer world. However, there's a couple of things that you need to know about it, so please take a glance at the information below. Basically, to kind of sum up for you, there's this good graphic they gave us, which is if you have Total War Warhammer 2 and you get the DLC, you get 2 Legendary Lords, the units, a couple of heroes as you might expect, as well as a free hero character. If you have both games, you get all of that, plus the changes to the Mortal Empires campaign map and the Old World updates. And then if you have the first game, the Realm of the Wood Elves DLC and Total War Warhammer 2, you get an additional free Legendary Lord to play with in Mortal Empires only. So that's interesting in its own right. And they won't be appearing in the Vortex at all. So you get new units and unit variants and everything, new hero spell laws, stuff like that. So that's all stuff to be expected that will come with the basic DLC. It kind of makes sense. I hope that made sense to you. I get what they're kind of expecting there. With this new Legendary Lord, if you have Total War Warhammer 1, the Realm of the Wood Elves DLC for Total War Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, and I assume the upcoming DLC pack, you will get an additional Legendary Lord, and we know it's a her. If you look at the second paragraph in this little thing, if you collected all the content, you'll get a bonus Legendary Lord with all the trimmings. We can't wait to introduce you to her, so that nails it down a little bit. For these Lord packs, for those of you who are perhaps new to the game, we are expecting basically 2 Legendary Lords, 2 characters that will go on to lead armies, Lord, kind of generic Lord unit, or maybe a generic hero unit. Sometimes it's been both, sometimes it's been one or the other. It's changed from DLC to DLC, that's a bit harder to predict, and we should get 3 or 4 units per faction as well. That's kind of what we're looking at, as well as additional Regiment of Renown and things like that, but I'm not going to delve too much into what I think the Regiment of Renown might be. That's always a bit of a shot in the dark, and almost isn't worth doing at this point. But let's take a look at the faction we know is in the game first of all, and that is the Wood Elves. The Wood Elves have a few characters that can be picked from the Legendary Lords. We have Araloth, who kind of grew up a coward, hunting like nothing terribly dangerous in the Wood Elf kingdoms. He was a noble. He kind of had this dream where he meets Lilith. Now, Lilith is an elven goddess who is also hiding out and pretending to be the Lady of the Lake for Bretonnians. She's kind of secretly tricked the Bretonnians into worshipping her, but she's not the goddess of the Wood Elves necessarily. So he's kind of maybe a sort of secret double agent kind of thing, a bit of a spy for another goddess, whereas Ariel is kind of the embodiment of the goddess of the Wood Elves. Araloth probably is the only actual lord from the 8th edition army book still left to put in the game. But no one's going to buy a DLC with Araloth in it, I don't think. He's not that great a character. He has a hawk that can attack people, but that's kind of who cares? Not really important character as far as the history of the Wood Elves are concerned. Which brings us to probably the most important character in the history of Wood Elves, and that is Ariel, the Queen of the Wood Elves. Now, she's had a storied history throughout the Warhammer world. She's gone up against the Beastmen a lot. She's gone up against Morathi. In fact, Morathi corrupted her with her dark magics after killing her sister. So there's a whole backstory between a rivalry between Morathi and Ariel that could be picked up upon if she is the Legendary Lord in the pack. So, huge possibility. I hope we see her as one of the two. I think we'd almost have to. She's so vital to the Wood Elf lore and story, and I think people have been clamoring for her. Also, the opportunity to make a great flying butterfly lord. That's a pretty great opportunity that I don't think the modelers at Creative Assembly could pass up. And to her right, we have Drycha. Now, Drycha's story is kind of a long one, but to kind of simplify it for you guys, I'll maybe go into Drycha's lore in a different video a little bit later on. But she basically followed, there were 3 elder treemen. Durthu was one of them, there was another who was the oldest and wisest of them who has now passed on, and there was a third. Now when Durthu came back from visiting the Elves of Ulthuan and the Chaos armies, the first Chaos invasion happened, and they were nearly wiped out, he took some stragglers through the world routes and brought them to Athel-Loren. Now, there was a bit of a debate about whether to let these elves live in their sacred forest. And one of the elders, not Durthu or the wisest one, was like, no way, we shouldn't let these elves live here at all. This is bloody crazy. And the wisest one sided with Durthu and says they could be a fantastic ally, we can live in harmony with them. And so the Wood Elves were born. Drycha is basically the lieutenant of the ancient tree spirit who said he didn't want the elves there. He eventually rebelled and was imprisoned in a tree, and Drycha is basically kind of probably trying to find a way to free him, as she has herself been exiled and is kind of wandering the world. Now, the reason I like her being in Total War Warhammer is that it's a good opportunity to allow for an evil Wood Elf force. A Wood Elf force that doesn't care about the boundaries of Athel-Loren, that is just trying to wipe out everything else. Now, in her army, you'd have to assume, or even in her faction and the whole, you'd have to assume they wouldn't allow Wood Elves in there, so they could only have Forest Spirit armies. That's an interesting possibility. Durthu at the moment can have elves. There's a bit of a penalty for him to have them in terms of how the Wood Elves work at the moment. But I like this character maybe not having any access to any elves whatsoever, which would mean you'd have to expand the roster for some more Forest Spirit units, but we'll get into that in a little bit. The last one on the list here are the twins, Naistra and Arahan. These guys are kind of steeped in mystery. No one really knows where they come from. I think in the end times, and you guys know I try to avoid end times lore, it's kind of confirmed they are the twin daughters of Ariel. So that's kind of where they come from, that's who they are. And they have some interesting mechanics in terms of how they work, or in terms of their lore at least. The dark-haired one is a bit more fiery and a sort of fierce-tempered, while the other one's a bit cooler and more calculated. And one's kind of focused on melee, the other likes to shoot from a distance. Now, the fiery, melee-focused one gets killed a lot, but apparently always comes back to life. There's tales of a vampire lord chopping her head off, and then within a moment when he turned around, she was alive again and chopped his head off. The idea being that her spirit goes into her sister and then comes out again and the body is rejuvenated. Now, they're very much a kind of two halves of the same person kind of argument happening here in terms of their abilities. But because they were relatively new in terms of the entire history of Warhammer, I don't think they will make an appearance. They are very interesting characters. They have a mount of a dragon or a great eagle. There's a lot of potential there for making a very fun legendary lord. But I don't think they're who we're going to get. Similar to why I don't think we are going to get Arlof. I don't think you're going to sell a DLC on the back of those two. You're going to need someone a lot more established or venerated enough to really move a DLC pack. And you're really looking for someone that the people are clamoring for, and I don't think the twins are necessarily one of those. Considering these 4 options, for me, I think if I'm CA, just trying to put myself in their shoes, I go for either Ariel or Drycha. Now, one of these will be the Legendary Lord in the pack, and one of them I think will be the free Legendary Lord if you own all the other Wood Elf related DLC and the first game. Which one, I don't know. I want to say I like the idea of a Drycha campaign, and also the fact that she's exiled would mean that she's wandering around the Warhammer world. So the idea that you'd have her on the Vortex map trying to find ways to free her old master is actually a pretty good story focus there for her, and a good reason she would be outside of Athel-Loren. Ariel, at the moment of the sort of before the end time stuff, was in kind of a state of hibernation in Athelloren itself. So she's not necessarily around, and why she isn't officially a legendary lord in the 8th edition of the Wood Elf book. So that's why she's not an official one, but I think she will make an appearance in Total War Warhammer 2. So I think between these two, it's hard to say at this point who would be the one you get in the pack, and who would be the free legendary lord you get if you own all the other stuff as well. So let's put that question aside for now. I think these two are going to be the ones we see. Also, it evens up nicely with the 2 male legendary lords that we have for the Wood Elves already. So let's have a look at what the units are we could potentially get. Now, the Wood Elf units have a few missing things in terms of their lords and heroes. In terms of their lords, they are missing a unit called the Spellweaver. This is just a magician lord, a magician general. They don't have that yet. They had that in the book of the 8th edition. They should probably get it again. And Spellweavers in the game have access to all 8 laws of magic. So like the High Elves now in the game after the update, they should be able to use any law of magic they want. But they're pretty standard. You could put them on a unicorn, maybe put them on a great eagle. We'll maybe have to see what we get in terms of the Spellweavers for mounts. But the other unit that is missing from the Wood Elves is the Shadow Dancers. Now, these are hero war dancers, which are a unit we have in the game already, but they also have access to the Law of Shadow, so they are magic melee fighting units, not unlike the sword masters of the High Elves, or the law masters even of the High Elves. So, very similar in terms of what they do. Probably less armored, probably maybe have frenzy as well. A bit better against non-armored infantry. But that is the Shadow Dancers for you there. So, I think these two are units that are missing from the book and will have to make an appearance. Now, in terms of the question of who will be the Legendary Lord in the pack and who will be the Legendary Lord who we get extra, I think this hints towards maybe Ariel having to be the Legendary Lord in the pack. Because I don't think you can sell a pack with Drycha, who would not really, for any law reason whatsoever, would not have Wood Elves in her armies, and then sell these 2 missing units as the hero and general of the new Wood Elf pack. You'd have to make it Ariel almost, just to make it make sense, and so you could use the new units that you get. Putting that aside again, let's move on to what the units might be. Now, in terms of the units for the Wood Elves, it's a bit of a mystery. For the most part, we have everything that the Wood Elves have in the army book for 8th edition. So the army's kind of complete, which is a good thing, I suppose, but it also leads us to a bit of a conundrum in terms of what they're actually going to put in the units of this new DLC pack. Let's start off with maybe some of the simple stuff, some of the stuff that's maybe hinted at in the army books that we haven't seen yet, that Creative Assembly might use some license to maybe expand upon. Now, the first one of those is unicorns. Now, we have unicorns in the Wood Elf army already, but just as mounts for your heroes and generals. They could perhaps be a unicorn herd going around, very quick, melee-focused, magical damage cavalry unit. Doing a lot of damage against the ethereal units, stuff like that. That would be very handy. Maybe give them an anti-large, piercing large things with their horns. I don't know, that could be something you play around with as well for the unicorns. But that's a possibility. Another possibility I thought of might be hounds, in terms of running dogs helping you chase down some units if you're a bit light on cavalry. Now, hounds are only really described as accompanying Orion, and they kind of got around giving Orion actual physical hounds in Total War Warhammer by giving him the spell with the hounds in it where they dance around. So maybe not, but maybe hounds, as the elves probably have hunting hounds. If Orion has a couple, hunting hounds is not out of the realm of possibility as a new unit for the Wood Elves. This one's going to be a bit controversial, but I think we might need an upgraded Forest Spirit unit. Now, in the Age of Sigmar, and people like playing the Age of Sigmar, I think that's perfect, and I think one of the things that fit thematically would be maybe actually stealing something from Age of Sigmar known as the Hunters of Kurnos, and maybe transporting them into the fantasy world, because they would kind of fit. They are forest spirits. There are forest spirits in the Warhammer fantasy world, and I think these units were kind of like sturdier, a bit better than your sort of normal forest units, kind of more quicker and more savage than your treekin. And this would kind of play into Drycha's faction as well, where she would go away and trying to train forest spirits to be a bit more warlike, so they can finally wipe out these pesky wood elves once and for all. So it would kind of fit thematically with a Drycha theme in terms of upgraded forest units, giving them weaponry such as bows or scythes or a sword. Now, if I was to pick one, I would quite like to see the Wood Elves have a hardy unit, not unlike the constructs of the Tomb Kings, with very long-range bows, like the Kurnos Hunters in the Age of Sigmar. That's how that could play into it. And it'd almost be like a good FU from Drycha to the Wood Elves. It's like, oh, you filthy Wood Elves, you come into my forest with your bows, we can have bows too, and they'll be bigger and better than yours, and we'll kill you with the weapon that you have shown us. That kind of thing, I think, would play nicely into that kind of thematic idea. But again, the idea of maybe lifting something from Age of Sigmar and putting it into Total War Warhammer 2, I don't know how well that would sit with the game creators. I don't know how well that would sit with Games Workshop. So it's a bit of a long shot, but some kind of upgraded, maybe missile-focused forest spirit would be something that would be great to see in a Wood Elf army. Another option for that is maybe having the concept of the Durthu wargrove. Now, the idea of this is an end-time unit of Durthu getting together some of his closest buddies, and they'd be armed to the teeth like Durthu, and they'd go in and they'd attack, unlike classic tree men who usually are just doing magic or using their limbs to kill anything around them. So this is an idea you could play with, maybe make it younger tree men who don't maybe have access to magic, but who are still able to produce weapons, make them a large melee-focused unit. That's something that could work as well in terms of a Durthu wargrove, or just a wargrove, you could call it. We're getting into a bit more of the obscure stuff now in terms of what direction Creative Assembly might take the Wood Elves, and we're looking at the Zoats. Now, the Zoats are known to be possibly an offshoot of the lizard men, maybe trapped in the old world, or for them, the new world, I guess, depending on how you look at it, and being separated from their kin for so long, they maybe became very different. Maybe they had a bit of an affair, maybe a Slan had an affair of a dragon ogre, and this is the result of it. Whatever the reasons, no one really knows. That dragon ogre thing, it isn't in the lore, that's just off the top of my head. And this is a unit that's very gifted in the Winds of Life magic. So they do a great lot of life magic, probably a good melee fighting unit. You could have them as a pack maybe with some life magic spells attached to them, almost like another kind of cavalry unit there. That's a possibility, and Zoats do have a history with the Wood Elves. It's said that they're so powerful with life magic that they do in fact teach the spell weavers and the spell singers of Athaloran how to engage in it properly if they can find one. They're known to live around sort of woodland areas as well, so that kind of ties them to the Wood Elf faction also. But they look like big lizards. They don't really look like they fit in particularly well with a Wood Elf army, but they're out there in terms of the possibilities. Now, we know Creative Assembly has not been shy of delving into a book called the Monstrous Arcanum, which has a lot of fun units in it, and I tried to have a look through that to see what you could actually apply to the Wood Elves, and I came out with two monstrous units, the first one being the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts. Now, this is the idea of beast magic being brought back to life, being rendered incarnate in the living world, and it becomes this sort of massive stag-headed creature that can go and attack. Now, the Wood Elves don't have a lot of monsters. They have the Forest Dragon, I suppose, and the Eagle, but that's about it. This could add to that, give them a bit more heft, give something a bit scary on the battlefield, something that could wrestle with the likes of the Abomination or the Lizard Men, Dinos, something like that. Now, these are usually more closely tied with the Amber Order of the Empire and with Beastmen a little bit as well. But, you know, with the spell weavers coming in, you know, bringing it, being able to pull in a bit more extra magic, we might see an incarnate elemental of beasts making an appearance. And the stag head thing makes it thematic enough that I could see Creative Assembly running with the idea. The other unit that's a possibility from the Monstrous Arcanum is the Praetor. Now this one I really like the look of. It's more compared to kind of a Manticore, the idea being that this is also slightly tied to the Beastmen, so they might not use it, but it's green, you know, it's good enough. It looks like a kind of foresty dwelling creature. It does eat human flesh and other, it's a carnivorous beast, despite its stag head there, so it does lure Knights of Bretonnia into the forests and eats them. So it would be a cool new flying unit to have, maybe a bit more melee focused, a bit more hardy than the dragon, or you could differentiate it in some way from the forest dragon itself. But the Praetor, I think, would be a very nice fit for the Wood Elves if they were looking to add extra units to their ranks. That's kind of it for my ideas of what we could possibly see in this DLC. At the end of this video, I will nail it down to, if I had to, like, you know, hold a gun to my head, guess what the units will be. I'll list that at the end of this video. But for now, let's have a little talk about what we think the other faction might be that's going up against the Wood Elves. Now, I have eliminated the High Elves, and I've eliminated the Lizardmen, because they both already have 6 Legendary Lords apiece. So if you're going to give every race 6 Legendary Lords, you're going to look to give either the Skaven or the Dark Elves the next Legendary Lord. A lot of the units of the Dark Elves have actually really already been kind of taken. They're all kind of in the game already, so there's not really a lot of units to add to the Dark Elf roster. There are a few heroes they have left that you could maybe make Legendary Lords, but in terms of the units, almost everything, I think everything is actually there on the table already. I think that Skaven, with a few units still to go, is probably the most likely of the two factions we'll see go against the Wood Elves. And they're in quite close relation as far as the Mortal Empires map goes as well, so you could see some conflict there. Let's move forward on the premise that I think it's going to be the Skaven up next, and I think the Skaven will probably have the choice of 4 Legendary Lords. Now, there's only going to be one of these showing up, so which one do we think it might be? Now, in the bottom right of your screen here, you'll see Thanquol. Now, Thanquol, you want to have someone who'll sell you a DLC. Thanquol's the guy to do it. He's the most written about Skaven, he's in the fiction the most, he has tons of lore, he's a legend in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. Now, let's have a look at some of the other options. Above him, we have Throt the Unclean. Basically the representative of Clan Moulder in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. He's long been a presence in Clan Moulder. Clan Moulder is the clan that kind of cobbles animals together and reanimates them. They're responsible for things like the Abomination. They're responsible for rat ogres. And they're the clan that have the most missing units in it as well at this time. Sticking with the Clan Moulder stuff, to Throt's left, we see Nortooth. Now, Nortooth is a packmaster for Clan Moulder, which would make him a bit of a hero for the clan, rather than necessarily its leader like Throt the Unclean. Now, these guys would be based in Hell Pit in the Mortal Empire map. Now, where they'll be in terms of the Vortex map, anyone's guess. They could be anywhere, probably just a bit to spread it out, put some Skaven where there aren't that many Skaven at the moment. But these two are both from the clan that probably have the most amount of missing units. So, kind of makes them front runners in my thinking. To the left of them, we have Screech the Vermin King. The king of all Skaven, a legendary leader that kind of re-emerged in the End Times. But I think they're probably going to save him for End Times DLC coming in the 3rd game. So I don't think we're going to see Screech yet. This brings us to the issue. I think we can rule out the Packmaster because he's more of a hero unit than a Legendary Lord. Now, we're looking at Thanquol and we're looking at Throt the Unclean. Thanquol, I think CA have actually gone on the record and said he will not appear in Game 2. Probably, again, keeping him in the tank for some kind of promotional thing, some pre-order thing, or perhaps even just an End Times DLC in the 3rd game. That's my thinking on it. So I think it will be Throt the Unclean, who is the Legendary Lord for the Skaven coming up in this Wood Elf DLC pack. So if we assume he's the Legendary Lord, let's have a look at the Lords and Heroes. Now, the hero, the general unit missing that we've seen some concept art from Creative Assembly through some of their artists online is the Verminlord. Now, they've appeared in some cutscenes, so you could say maybe that concept art was just for the cutscene, but it's here. We have it, the older model on the left, as opposed to some of the new ones, which look absolutely fantastic. But these are the Verminlords, kind of the demons summoned up from the Nether to lead armies of Skaven onto the battlefield. Truly threatening generals, and I hope we get to see them in this DLC. If you want to take out Vanquil, Verminlords is a good starting point to really sell to Skaven fans this DLC if they can get their hands on some Verminlords. In terms of heroes for the Skaven, most of them in terms of official heroes we kind of have. But the Skaven army is a bit weird. It has all sorts of ins and outs and side rules and characters and stuff like that. So there is the opportunity to introduce one more hero, and that is the packmaster. Now, the packmaster actually plays a role in, herding giant rats, herding rat ogres, stuff like that. So it could bring huge bonuses to Clan Moulder units, which, again, as we'll see, we have a good few of those coming up. And that's a potential new hero for the Skaven. So let's have a look at what some of these units are, shall we? And let's start with the Brood Horror. Now, the Brood Horror is something that emerges when Clan Moulder is trying to breed giant rats. That is when one has this weird mutant gene in it, it starts to become huge, it eats all the giant rats around it, grows to this tremendous size, and becomes this horrible monstrosity that kind of barrages itself around the battlefield. They might do this unit as a single unit, there might be a pack of Brood Horrors that Creative Assembly orchestrate, but this is a unit that comes out of the Monstrous Arcanum, and Arcanum even, and it could be introduced, and I think it probably will be, as it is a Clan Moulder related unit. The next unit we are going to see are wolf rats, kind of fast dog-like rats. Good unit for the Skaven to have in terms of maybe get around, shutting down some missiles of the enemy. They don't really have cavalry at the moment, so this is something that's not cavalry, but it's something you can use to deal with missile threats, as opposed to just having your units chase after them, which can be a bit slower. Some quick wolf rats would be a great addition to a Skaven army, and just to trap out some of those pesky missiles, or even siege engines, stuff like that. So I think wolf rats, again from the Monstrous Arcanum, would be a great addition to the Skaven roster. Also, kind of related to Clan Moulder, but Clan Moulder apparently don't know where they came from, but they do breed them themselves, but they don't take credit for this one. The Brood Horrors, they're like, yeah, that happens sometimes, that's our bad, but the Wolf Rats is a bit more mysterious. Apart from the Wolf Rats, we also have your classic giant rats, which might be quite hard to represent in the game. In fact, the giant rats were very much a sort of staple of the tabletop game, but I think they might be more of a swarm ability that if you had a packmaster hero, he might get. I think they're maybe just a bit too wee for the uses in any kind of Creative Assembly game. They'd be a bit hard to manage, you wouldn't really know what to do with them. So Giant Rats is missing from the roster of the Skaven, but I think we'll see them integrated in some different way than necessarily units to recruit on the battlefield. That leaves us with one thing, and now I thought they were going to save these for a end times pack, but I think it's come time, if you want to sell this pack to Skaven fans, you introduce Storm Fiends. That is selling it, you get them. Storm Fiends are upgraded rat ogres who can have a variety of different weaponry on them. You can have Storm Fiends with guns, with gauntlets, with flamethrowers. You can have a whole variety of Storm Fiends, and you can have them as mounts as well. So if you introduce Storm Fiends, and they are a collaboration between Clan Moulder and Clan Scryer. We got a whole bunch of Clan Scryer stuff last time round with Ikit Claw, and some Clan Moulder stuff would be pretty good to have on the field. And you want to sell this DLC pack, you throw in Storm Fiends, job done. But they might be holding them back for an End Times DLC, I don't know, but I think Storm Fiends, if you don't give them Fanqual, if you don't give the crowds Fanqual, you give them Storm Fiends and Verminlords, and they'll be pretty damn happy about it, I think. So that's the units I think we're looking at for the Skaven. Time for predictions, and I'll put a gun to my head style. Let's go for it. Here's what I think we'll be getting in this DLC pack. Again, just my thoughts. Do let me know in the comments down below what you think we'll be getting. But without further ado, let's have a look. let's call it, for the sake of it, the Queen and the Unclean, where we get Ariel, we get the Spellweavers, we get the Shadow Dancers, we get the Unicorn Herd, we get some kind of missile forest spirit unit, and we get the Praeton. Now, the reason I went for Ariel over Drycha is just those two general and hero units that the Wood Elves still need in their roster. You can't add those two and have them be led by Drycha. It just doesn't make any sense lore-wise. It would go against what like her unit stuff is, and I think that's the way you'd have to play it. So you get Ariel, the Spellweaver, Shadow Dancer, Unicorn Herd, Missile, and the Praeton. I think the Praeton is, although kind of a potentially evil unit, a fun addition to the Queen and the Unclean. And you give Ariel, like you want some people to come back to your Wood Elves, you give them Ariel. She's pretty great. Now, in terms of the Skaven, you may have seen already, Throt the Unclean, I think the Verminlords, I think the Packmaster with some kind of giant rat ability that they can do that maybe damages units around them, the Brood Horror, the Wolf Rats, and the Storm Fiends. I think that's what we're looking at. Very related to Clan Moulder, the Packmaster, the Brood Horrors, the Wolf Rats, and the Storm Fiends, all related to Clan Moulder, all related to Throt the Unclean. A very neat thematic pack that for the Skaven. Having said that, that's what I think it is. There are some units I've mentioned that I don't think are on that list, but you never know. I just thought I'd mention them to you guys, see if they make an appearance. They may be, the more the merrier, the more units, the happier I am. So that's just what I think the DLC pack will be, along with what I think it might be called, but again, I don't know. If I think that's it, then I think the Legendary Lord we get, if you have Total War Warhammer 1, Total War Warhammer 2, and the Realm of the Wood Elves, as well as this upcoming DLC, I think will be Drycha. I think she'll probably start somewhere near the Drakwold and Laurelorn Forest, because that's where a place where she's been spotted in the Mortal Empires campaign. She will have an army that has mechanics that's just around forest spirits, and I think the Praeton will fall into her arm. She'll have all the animals she wants and the forest spirits, just no elves. I think that's what her faction will probably look like. And she has a reason to, if you guys remember the good old days in Warhammer 1, where the Wood Elves would just conquer half the world, that's what Drycha could do, conquer half the world. There's good lore reasons for it. She can just be trying to wipe out all organic life. So that's what I think we're looking at there. Now, we also have been offered a free hero with this upcoming DLC. Now, who could this be? If they're sticking thematically with the Clan Moulder stuff, that would be Durthu the Packmaster. So that's a potential one. But also, as the Dark Elves are missing 3 hero units, they could throw in one of the Dark Elf units. Now, if you want to help move a DLC pack that, you know, has some units that people aren't that familiar with, maybe you haven't given people Thankwall, you maybe have some other questions, you have an option to give them a Dark Elf hero as well. Now, there are 3 Dark Elf heroes left to make an appearance in Total War Warhammer 2. They are Tullerus, the Executioner, Shadowblade, the best assassin the Dark Elves have ever had, can bring empires to their knees single-handedly, and Corran Darkhand, the captain of the Black Guard, Malekith's sort of right-hand man, if you will. Now, Tullerus is an interesting character. There's some rumors that he actually might be the Chosen of Cain instead of Malekith, but either of these 3 guys could be a great character if you're just looking to finish off the Dark Elf roster. That's about it, ladies and gentlemen, for me in terms of what I'm thinking. So I think we'll have Ariel. If you are interested in knowing a bit more about her lore, do check the top right-hand corner now, or you'll find a link in the description below for my lore video on Ariel, the Queen of the Wood Elves, if you want to know a bit more about her. But I think we'll get her against Throt the Unclean. It's not a classic matchup in terms of them having a grudge against each other, but it's a good, neat package if you're trying to tie up both of those armies in terms of filling out the last of their rosters. So that's my opinion, guys. Do let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope to catch you all on the next one. Alright, guys? Bye.